Uh, Good morning. Welcome to the 7th lecture on electromagnetic. Today, in front of me, I have SMIT.
Yes, ma'am.
SMIT students, I'm watching you. Can you just wave to acknowledge? SMIT, can you wave just to acknowledge? Okay, fine, great. Okay. So, again, I want you to a show of hands. I mean, have you watched the previous? Were you participating in the previous 6 lectures? If yes, please give me a show of hand. Have you participated in the previous 6 lectures? Okay, so you know what's happening. Okay, thank you. So the last class, what we were talking about was the fact that whenever you are setting up a simple circuit like can I go? Okay, fine. So what we were talking about last time was whenever we were setting up a simple circuit like connecting a source to a load through a very non-dangerous looking line, and if the frequency is large enough or if the length of the line is large enough, turns out that what we are setting up is a forward propagating wave and a reverse propagating wave. And the amplitude of the reverse propagating wave is now decided by the characteristic impedance of the line and the load that you are connecting. And both of them are co-propagating in the system. So what really happens is voltage at any point in this line, if I do, pen is playing up. Okay. So whenever I am measuring a voltage at any point on this line, using maybe an oscilloscope or any voltage measuring device, what I would see is the sum of the V plus and the V minus, because they are coexisting at any point in the line, right. So what, to visualize how what is happening, what we have written down is a small Python code to which is actually simulating a forward propagating wave and a reverse propagating wave. The code is very simple. It is actually defining the first parts of the code is just to say, well, I'll show you how the code running so that you will understand what we are trying to do. So on the top red you see a forward propagating plus Z propagating wave. The green shows the reverse propagating wave. The y-axis is amplitude, x-axis is length. Both of them are oscillating as a function of time. It's propagating, so these are propagating waves. Now at the bottom blue, which is probably not clear, but for some strange reason if I move this window the program stops running. So let me try running this again. What I have done is I have just written down the superposition of the two waves. Let me just try this, running this code again. So it's a simple enough code written in Python, which is a freeware. All what I have done is, maybe I can share this code with you through the QEEE team. You can try running this code. So what is done is, you have a Y1 and you have a Y2, which is where Y1 is the amplitude of the voltage in the forward direction, Y2 is the amplitude in the reverse direction. It's getting multiplied by a gamma, which is the reflection coefficient. In this case, I reckon it as 1. The phase of the gamma is 0, which means you can play around with. Remember, we told the other day, that depending on the kind of the load that you are posing, it could be a real load or it could be a complex load. The impedance could be real or complex. So depending on that, you could have a phase for this gamma. In this case, I have taken gamma as 1 with 0 phase, and let's see if this code runs. What it is supposed to show you is Y1, Y2 and Y, which is the sum of the forward propagating and the reverse propagating wave. It's running, but looks like it doesn't like this screen to be shared, and so it's playing up. Okay, here's our figure which shows the standing wave, but it is not showing up as a function of time. No, the problem is, okay, close. So as you see here, what we have done is just, you could do a MATLAB or you could do any of those software that you can write up. I've just varied x and t and put it in a loop with t less than limit, where the limit I define as some 30, and I'm evaluating y1 and y2, which is y1 and y2 are the voltages corresponding to the forward and the reverse, and I have added y as y1 and y2 is a function for the standing wave. Let's try once again. If it doesn't work, what I'll do is I'll send you this code. You please run it in your computers and you can see for yourself how the standing wave is evolving. All right. So you see what's happening here. The red is propagating, so is the green, but in the reverse direction. And if what I want you to watch is the superposition, which is not a propagating wave. At a given position, if you see, its amplitude keeps oscillating. There are specific positions for which this amplitude is taking 0, but about that position you have the amplitudes oscillating high and low. So that's kind of telling you how these voltage waves are set up when you connect a source to a load that is not matching. As I said, in this case, so you see this given position, the amplitude of the wave keeps changing as a function of time. If I can draw and show you, it would look like this. At one instant of time, the sum of the amplitudes would look like this, but as a function of time, you know, this, if I can draw it in another color, this amplitude would start reduce as a function of time. It may go to 0, but as a function of time, it's as if the waves are breathing in and out, but the position of maximum amplitude remains the same, position of minimum amplitude remains the same, right. So what I will do is I'll share this Python script with you through the QEEE team. Recommend you please run this code and see for yourself how the standing wave is evolving when your gamma is 1, which is okay, gamma is equal to 1 would correspond to your open circuit case, and you can keep changing the reflection, you can keep changing the phase to see how the standing wave pattern is evolving. Okay, now that we are familiar with that, it simply means that when you connect the transmission, when the source to the load through a transmission line, it is not uniform voltage that is set up across this line. Across the line you will see that as a function of time you have a voltage wave that is set up, which is changing as a function of time, but the positions of maxima and minima are predefined, in the sense that if this is the minimum at this point, at this location, you would throughout the line at this position you will always get a minimum, right. I've also shared a tutorial with you. I do not know whether it has reached you. If it has reached you, can you say, show your hand and say if it has reached? SMIT, did you get the tutorial? No, it has been shared to the QEEE team. I would request them to share the tutorial sheets with you. Yeah, I think last week in the beginning I sent. First week we did not have class, so it was, they were supposed to be working on that tutorial. To there were so many email addresses, to all of them it was sent. So just remind them to send that. Yeah. Okay. It will be useful to work out those tutorials because those will test your understanding, and we can have probably a session to discuss the solutions of the tutorial also. Now we go on to the point where we are now going to be talking about impedance along the line. In the same way, can you please share this Python script also to them, right? So that they can run it at their computers and see. All right. So you know voltage is a function of Z because it's changing as a function of Z. So does the current, which means if I say impedance of the line, that is a function of Z. Remember, this is different from, so I can say this voltage at a given Z to the current at that Z would give me the impedance at that Z, which we call as the input impedance of the line. Now what I want you to note is that this is different from the characteristic impedance. Which is Z0 decided by the physical parameters or the way you make the line. So this characteristic impedance, we know it is dependent on the inductance, capacitance, resistance and conductance. So characteristic impedance is decided by how you make up the line, how is the line constructed, whereas the input impedance is simply the ratio of voltage to current. And we know the voltage at any point is a sum of the forward propagating wave. So we have denoted that that using V0 plus, right. So because it's traveling in the forward direction, we have V0 plus e power minus j beta z. The propagating wave, the gamma factor of that reverse propagating wave is reflected, gamma V0 plus e power plus j beta z. Their video seems to be frozen. This is SMIT. is from divided by V naught plus over Z naught e power minus j beta z minus gamma E naught plus over Z naught e power plus j beta z. This is pulling out the voltage, resultant voltage wave and the resultant current wave. Now this I can cancel out a V naught, I can pull out the Z naught, I get Z naught e power minus j beta z plus gamma reflection coefficient we derived the other day, ZL minus Z naught by ZL plus Z naught. That's the voltage reflection coefficient e power plus j beta z divided by something similar in the denominator but with a minus sign, e power minus j beta z minus ZL minus ZO by ZL plus ZO. If I make this expansion, I will have ZL times, so ZO is outside the denominator, expand this fraction, I get ZL times e power minus j beta z plus e power j beta z, because there is a ZL times e power j beta z sitting here, and I will have a Z naught times e power minus j beta z minus e power j beta z divided by something similar, but it is ZL times e power minus j beta z minus e power j beta z Z naught times e power minus j beta z plus e power j beta. This is simply expanding the fraction, making the denominators common. Now this is nothing but 2 cos beta z and this is 2j sin beta z. So I could write this as Z naught you can do this, write this expression in terms of cos and sine. Now I am trying to find, the reason I am doing this is to figure out, so this is my line, I am trying to figure out what is the input impedance at a distance L from the line, from the load end. So this is my load, and somewhere during this derivation I had assumed that Z equal to 0 is at the load end. I am trying to figure out what is the impedance at a distance minus L. Alright, what is the value of the impedance at a distance minus L, so that I know if I have a length L of the line with characteristic impedance, what is the input impedance posed by the line with the load. That's the idea, right? So the motivation is to find out what is the input impedance at that minus L distance. So I of course need to find input impedance at Z. So this to complete this would be ZL cos beta Z minus j Z naught sin beta Z, because there is divided by ZL minus ZL j ZL sin beta Z plus Z naught cos beta Z. Now if I evaluate this term, this input impedance at equal to minus L, what I would end up getting is Z input impedance at minus L distance is Z naught times, I will have to merely substitute Z is equal to minus. Cos being an even function, this would give me cos beta L. This is an odd function, so when Z equal to minus L, you will have Sine beta minus L is minus sine beta L. So this would be plus J Z naught sine beta L divided by same way Z naught cos beta L plus J ZL sin beta L. Now this is a very useful relation. I can actually simplify this and say Z input impedance at minus L is Z naught times. I divide throughout by sine, I would get ZL plus J Z naught tan beta L divided by I divide it throughout by cos beta L, so I will get this Z naught plus J ZL tan beta L. I mean, this division was just to make look this expression simpler, but in general this relation is very useful. Why is this useful? Because this relation is going to finally help me solve my transmission line problem and make it look like a circuit theory problem, right? So how am I going to do that? What I'm going to do, what this relation means, what is the physical meaning? It means that, as I've drawn earlier, if I pick up a transmission line of characteristic impedance Z0, if the length of the line is L and if a load ZL is connected to the line, then I can replace this whole circuit, I can replace this, the effect of the whole circuit with this input impedance. The impedance caused by the transmission line of length L with a load ZL is equivalent to Zin minus L, this number. This is an easy enough number to calculate, because if I know Z0, if I know the length of the transmission line, if I know beta, which is 2 pi over lambda, so if I know the frequency, I can calculate beta, put it in this. So just with the knowledge of these 4 parameters, we are primarily influencing the characteristic of the line, which is essentially Z0, the load which decides how much of the voltage is getting reflected, the frequency and the length of the line. If I know all these parameters, I know what is the equivalent impedance posed by the transmission line. In other words, when I am connecting a source with a generator with its internal impedance to a transmission line with characteristic impedance Z0 and a load ZL, there are a lot of things happening in the line. You had a forward propagating voltage, you have a reverse propagating voltage, so you have a standing wave setup. At every point on the line you are seeing that the impedance is changing. All that effect can be now simplified by saying that I can still use my circuit theory concept, provided I do this. What do I do? I replace this entire section with an impedance equal to Zin minus L. I replace this effect, I can replace the effect of the line and the load . Can you please mute your audio? Mute it here. Okay. SMIT. Okay, it should be better. Okay. So all what we are saying is the effect of the line with the load can be considered by just replacing the line and the load with an equivalent impedance Zin minus L, which can be calculated knowing the length of the line, Z0, frequency and ZL. These 4 parameters decides my input impedance of the line with the load. Calculate that, and then that would help me find the final voltage across, what is the voltage across the load, because if you remember we had solved for Vz and Iz, and there is one last parameter V0 plus that remains to be determined, and because Vz is V0 plus e power minus j beta z plus gamma in the entire theory we had a V0 plus and a V0 minus, I0 plus, I0 minus, we had 4 variables. We had brought it down to a single variable problem, and this impedance is now going to help me solve what is V0 plus, because if I is the current, through the line, I can say that input voltage is I times Zn, and this current is, it's a simple series circuit, so this current is Vg divided by Zg plus Zn minus L. But I know that EI, which is the voltage here, is nothing but voltage at the position minus L. Remember, this point is the voltage at the position minus L, and so this is V0 plus e power minus j beta z. Instead of z you put minus L, so this would be minus plus j beta L plus e power minus gamma minus j beta L. This is Vg over Zg plus Zn at minus L. So this is helping us to calculate, because we know what is beta, what is L, we know what is Zg, we know what is Zn, we know what is Vg, the applied voltage. So the only unknown here is to find V0. So the V0 can be calculated from this. So that completes the understanding of what really happens to the voltage and current through the transmission line when you connect a voltage source to the line. So to sum it up, when I connect a voltage source to a load through a line where the transmission line effects cannot be ignored, what I get is standing waves set up along the line when gamma is not equal to 0. And remember, impedance matching does not mean that the source impedance and the load impedance are identical. Impedance matching would mean ZL equal to ZO. Impedance matching is going to mean ZL equal to ZO. Impedance matching is going to mean ZL equal to ZO, and this is in contrast case where ZL is equal to source impedance. This was for your maximum power transfer theorem in your circuit theory. That doesn't work here anymore. You need to be matching your impedance, load impedance, not with the source impedance, but with the transmission line characteristic impedance. The second thing is the effect of line plus ZL can be replaced by or can be represented as an equivalent impedance Zin, which is equal to Z0 times whatever we wrote down earlier, Z0 times ZL plus JZ0 tan beta L divided by Z0 plus JZL tan beta L. Alright, this is the take home. Now, there are some useful applications or useful cases that you need to cut that would be useful. I mean, not to consider all what we have been saying until now is that if I have a large frequency, long length, I need to be considering the effect of transmission line, and the effects of transmission line is finally summed up as these. But the question is, can we use these effects for an application? So until now we have been looking at transmission line theory as something that is going to that's preventing the transfer of voltage from the source to the load, or something that is kind of negative effect, where you are saying that you expect uniform voltage across the line, but that's not the case. You have a standing wave, you need to be worrying about the impedance matching and so on. So these were all kind of deleterious effects. Now the question we are asking is, now that we have these kind of effects at high frequency, can I use this transmission line effects? Can I use this concept of, for example, the input impedance is going to get transformed to this. This is the transformed impedance. As the length of the line changes, the input impedance keeps changing, right? So can I use this somewhere? And the answer is yes. This is one application I am talking about, is used for the design of inductors and capacitors at high frequencies. So if I want an inductor to work at very high frequency, your regular coil inductor, right? A regular coil inductor would be something like this. But when you go to, so you know that the coil inductor would have an inductive reactance XL omega L, right? And or a capacitor will have, with capacitance C, would have a capacitive reactance is 1 over j omega C. This is all fine. The effective impedance posed by, we say the effective impedance posed by the inductor is XL, the effective impedance posed by the capacitor is ZC, which is 1 over j omega C. But this all works fine at low frequencies. At high frequency, what happens is, the leads of the capacitor, so your capacitor is typically like this with 2 leads, right? So the leads of the capacitor would pose an inductance. And the coil would be wound around a non-conductor. So the 2 windings of the coil would now act as a plates of the capacitor. So you would start getting some capacitive effects in a pure inductor, and you would start getting inductive effects in a pure capacitor, right? This happens at high frequencies. So at high frequencies, what we will have is capacitive effects in an inductor and inductive effects in a capacitor, which is not good because you would have designed your circuit assuming that it's a pure inductor. You would not have accounted for capacitance. Same is the case with the capacitance. So, design of pure L and pure C at high frequency is actually a very big challenge. It's not at all easy to get a pure capacitor or a pure inductor at frequencies like gigahertz. So, if your electronic circuit is operating at high frequencies, you can't use an inductor and ignore the effect of capacitance. So, here is where your transmission line is going to help. Let us say you consider a transmission line of length L and you are short circuiting the transmission, which means your ZL equal to 0. A transmission line that is short circuited. I have taken a finite length L with Z0 as a characteristic impedance. Now, if you calculate what is Zin, which means the effective impedance posed by this line, the short circuited line of length L, I go back and substitute here ZL equal to 0, what would I get? I will get ZL is 0 here, it's 0 here, so I would just Z0 gets cancelled, so I have J Z0 tan beta L. So, my Zin at minus L is J Z0 tan beta. Alright. Now, we can think about using this section of the short circuited transmission line as a pure inductor or as a pure capacitor. When would it act as a pure inductor? When this quantity is positive, this line would act as a inductor, because when this is positive, you know that tan beta L could be positive or negative. So, if you beta L in such a way that tan beta L is positive, then I can represent this as something equal to J omega L, the effective impedance, effective inductance of the line. But if I choose my tan beta L as negative, which I can do, I can choose beta L appropriately such that tan beta L is negative, then I have J times a negative number, right, which I can, that negative I can force it as 1 over J. So, then I can write the effective impedance as 1 over J omega effective capacitance. So, I can choose to make this line work as, this line can now work as an inductor or a capacitor just by making tan beta L positive or tan beta L negative. Alright. I know exactly how to make tan beta L positive and negative. I know that in the range 0 to, for beta L ranging from 0 to pi by 2, this is positive, which means 0 less than L less than pi by 2 beta, or 0 less than L less than pi by 2 pi by lambda, or 0 less than L less than lambda by 4, this will work as an inductor. And when will it be negative? Lambda by 4 less than L less than lambda by 2. A short circuited transmission line would work like a capacitor. I have to just choose. In fact, these are the smallest lengths that would work as inductor and capacitor. You can go to other multiples of lambda and choose an appropriate length, but within a certain range to make a short circuit transmission line. Suppose its impedance like a pure inductor or a pure capacitor. That is the application of transmission line, right? Maybe we can work out a problem tomorrow based on this. I think time is up for today. So I open to questions. There are any questions, please hand raise. So SMIT, do you have any questions? There are any questions, please hand raise. How a traveling wave, so there is a question from VCAP, how is a traveling wave concept applied to a linear induction motor? I am not too sure whether you can apply the traveling wave concept in an induction motor, because the induction motor, I suppose, works at low frequencies. So probably the concept of transmission line does not exist there. Let me try and connect to VCAP to see what they mean by this question. Okay, so VCAP, I elected you. Can you repeat your question? In what context are you asking? Why do you think that traveling wave concept would apply in induction motor at all? I think your audio is muted. So can you please? Can you please unmute audio? I can't hear you because your audio seems to be muted.
Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Good morning.
Actually, the question is how traveling wave concept is applied to linear induction motor. Hello?
So my response was, I'm not too sure whether the concept of transmission line would apply in an induction motor.
Actually, the general conventional induction motor, the concept is produced in a rotating magnetic field. But in case of linear induction motor, linear induction motor principle application, linear induction motor, the concept of production of flux is linear traveling wave wise. So can we relate the traveling wave principle transmission line here to linear induction motor?
Can you repeat the last part of your statement? In a linear induction motor, the principle is?
Line, the traveling wave concept is there. Okay, madam.
What is the traveling wave concept that you use in a linear induction motor?
The linear induction motor, the principle of flux producing the linear induction motor is traveling wave principle.
I am not too sure what traveling wave principle are you talking about, but I can tell you that the frequencies that you are considering in a linear induction motor is not high enough to apply any transmission line concept.
Okay, okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah. There's another question here from MLVGTEC. since the input impedance in a is variable in a transmission line, then how is the characteristic impedance a constant value? So that is the whole point here, that the characteristic impedance is a constant value indeed. Z0 is a constant value indeed, which is depending on your L, C, R and G. But depending on what length of line you are connecting and the load that you have, the kind of voltage waves, the standing waves that is set up is different, because if you have a length which is very, very short, you might have only half of the standing wave. If your length is large, you might have 2 complete standing waves being set up. If the length is correct, at this point it would be standing wave minima. Or if I have a shorter length or a different length, at this point, at the point of the load, the standing wave would be reaching its maxima, right? So the entire point is that depending, it's actually dependent on the length. If you remember our first class on transmission line also, we said that if the length is large, or depending on the length, we have the impedance posed by the line plus load differing. So yes, the characteristic impedance remains to be a constant. In spite of that, your input impedance posed by the certain varying depending on the length of the line and the load. So are there, okay, I have PSG CT. PSG CT, can you please ask the question? Good morning.
Good morning. Ma'am, at high frequencies, a capacitor inductive effect occurs and an inductor capacitor effect occurs. I want to know why does it occur only at high frequencies? What is the reason for occurring at high frequencies?
So, for example, if you take capacitor, so the question is the benefit of others. Why does an inductive effect at high frequencies and a capacitive effect for the inductor happen at low? So, if you take a capacitor, for example, you have the age of the capacitor. Now, it is supposed to work only like with a dielectric, and so with a certain you have a certain epsilon 0, you have a certain A, you have a certain D, and your capacitance is epsilon 0, A and D, and supposed to work as a pure. At high frequency, what happens is your electric field continuously changes at a very fast rate, which means there is a large contribution of E by 2. So there is a magnetic flux between the 2 leads of the capacitor. You are linking the magnetic flux, and that produces a self EMF or a back EMF, and that starts building up, making it work as if it is an inductor. Right? So we will deal with all this rate of change and in the next class when we are starting to talk about electric field and magnetic field and Ampere's law and Gauss law and all that. But simple reason is because of the large change in electricity, there is a magnetic flux linked with the wires of the capacitor, and these wires of the capacitor would now start having a flux linked and delinked, so because of which it will start working like an inductor. Hope that answers your question. Yeah. Another question here. Since is variable. A question: how does an inductor act? Already. There is one more question. Since the incident frequencies are different, then maxima and minima will be constant everywhere. Maxima is guided by Length of maxima is decided by how much voltage. Look at in a standing wave. Okay, this is where it is. This is what we discussed in the last class. How strong is the maxima or how strong or how weak is the minima? This is decided by your gamma, which means your ZL, Z0. See, I had shown you the case, drawn you the case where it is neither short circuit nor open circuit. So gamma is not equal to 1. In that case, you had a maxima and a minima which is decided by the gamma. All what we are seeing is at this position as a function of time, the voltage now, if I keep looking at the amplitude, the voltage now goes minima, comes back, reaches the max. So I'll send you that simulation. Maybe you should run that simulation. That will help you understand this better. Other question I have is, can the characteristic impedance be complex valued? So if we go back to the definition of characteristic impedance, which we did probably in the second class or the third class, use the mouse. So we defined gamma, and after that we defined Z0 here, where the Z0 is this R plus j omega L by G plus j omega C. Okay, so in this case, in fact, Z0 is in general complex. It becomes real only when R and G becomes 0, then it becomes real. Otherwise, it is in general complex. So, but we say a lossless line would have R and G 0. So, for a lossless line, it becomes real. Otherwise, in general complex. There's one question. Users. Okay. Who's that? Okay. PSG CT. PSG CT, can you ask your question?
Ma'am, in the expression for V of minus L, that is V of minus L is equal to Vg by Zg plus Zn of minus L. The dimension of left hand side is in volts, whereas the dimension of right hand side is in current. It's in amperes.
Which expression are you talking about?
The expression for V of minus L. V of minus L is equal to V naught plus into e bar j beta L plus gamma e bar minus j beta L.
Is it this one you're talking about?
No, ma'am. After.
After this? Here?
Below that. That's it. Vi is equal to V of minus L is equal to V naught plus into e bar j beta L.
Ha. Okay. Here This is current. This is current. Right, right. You're right. I have substituted for current voltage by impedance. That of course has to be substituted with ZL. Here it is, right. This part is what is substituted. Is that what we were talking about? And so this right side would also get. There's something which I skipped. Time is up, so we meet again on Thursday. Yes, there is class on Thursday, where we will take an example of an actual transmission line, like a coaxial cable, and discuss what is happening in a coaxial cable. All right, thank you.